A skinny German shepherd stood outside an old wooden door. Her fur was dirty, her legs were shaking, and her ribs were showing through her skin. She looked tired, like she had walked for many miles. Beside her was a tiny puppy, trying to stay close to his mother. The puppy was weak too. He could hardly stand. His little legs wobbled and he fell once, but he got up again. The mother dog didn't bark. She didn't growl. She only looked up at the house with sad, tired eyes. Her eyes were full of pain, but also hope. She seemed to be begging silently, asking someone to help her and her baby. Inside the house lived an old man named Henry Wilson. He had been alone for many years. His wife had died, and since then, the house had been quiet and cold. Henry didn't smile much anymore. He talked to no one. Every morning he sat near the window with his cup of tea, looking outside without really seeing anything. But that cold morning was different. Henry looked out and saw the mother dog and her puppy standing at his door. His heart beat a little faster. He slowly stood up and walked to the door. When he opened it, cold air rushed in, but he didn't feel it. He only saw the two animals in front of him, shaking from hunger and the freezing wind. The mother dog looked at Henry again. There was something in her eyes, something that touched Henry deeply. It was not fear. It was trust. The puppy took a small step forward but fell down. The mother gently nudged him with her nose. She was trying to keep him going, even though she herself was so weak. Henry's eyes filled with tears. He softly said, "Come inside, both of you." At first, the dogs didn't move. They didn't know if it was safe. But then, the mother slowly took a step forward. She looked at Henry again, and then walked through the open door. The puppy followed her, stumbling a little, but still trying his best. Henry led them to the small kitchen. He poured some water in a bowl and found some leftover chicken in the fridge. He warmed it up and placed it on a plate. The smell of food filled the room. The puppy rushed to the plate, eating quickly, his little tail wagging. But the mother waited. She watched her puppy eat first. Even though she was starving too, she made sure her baby had food before she touched anything. Henry watched quietly. "You're a good mom," he whispered. He brought out a blanket and placed it near the heater. The mother dog slowly lay down, and the puppy curled up beside her. Henry sat in his chair, watching them sleep. The room felt warm, not just because of the heater, but because something had changed. The house wasn't empty anymore. That night, for the first time in many years, Henry didn't feel alone. He sat beside the two dogs, listening to their soft breathing. The mother's eyes opened for a moment, and she looked at Henry. Her eyes didn't look sad now. They looked grateful. Henry smiled, a small, quiet smile, but real. He looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you," as if speaking to his late wife. And then he looked back down at the sleeping dogs and said, "You're safe now. You're home." The next morning, soft sunlight shone through the window of Henry's small living room. On the floor, the two dogs were still sleeping peacefully. The mother dog's body was curled around her puppy, keeping him warm. Henry stood nearby, holding a cup of tea. He had not felt this kind of calm in years. As he watched them, he smiled and said to himself, "They need names." He looked at the mother dog. Her eyes were gentle, and she carried herself with quiet dignity, even though she was tired and weak. There was a calm power in the way she protected her puppy, like the light of the moon in a dark sky. Henry whispered, "I'll call you Luna." It means moon. You're quiet, but strong. Then he looked at the tiny puppy, who was now awake and rolling around on the blanket. The little one bit his own tail, then tried to bark, but it came out as a squeaky yip. He stumbled toward Henry, tripped over his own feet, then licked Henry's slipper. Henry chuckled. "And you," he said, picking the puppy up carefully. "You're full of energy, aren't you? Even after everything you've been through." The puppy wagged his tail happily. "I'll call you Max." Later that morning, Henry made a call to the local vet clinic. "Dr. Emily," he said when she answered, "I found two dogs. They're in bad shape. Can you come take a look?" An hour later, Dr. Emily, a kind woman in her early 30s with gentle eyes and a calm voice, arrived. She had known Henry for years, though they had rarely spoken since his wife passed away. She stepped into the house and gasped softly when she saw Luna and Max. "They're lucky you found them," she said as she gently examined Luna. "The mother has an old injury on her back leg. It must have hurt for a long time. She moved her hand slowly over the dog's ribs. And they're both very thin. But with love, food, and care, they'll be okay. Henry watched as Dr. Emily gave Luna a pain relief shot and some vitamins. Max tried to nibble on her stethoscope. She laughed and said, "This little one is already getting stronger." When she was done, Henry nodded. "They're staying with me," he said simply. The days that followed were different from anything Henry had experienced in years. Every morning, Luna waited near the kitchen door, her eyes watching Henry with quiet trust. She moved slowly because of her leg, but she was no longer afraid. She would nudge his hand with her nose when he brought her food. At night, she lay near the fireplace, resting peacefully. Max, on the other hand, brought chaos and joy into the home. He followed Henry everywhere, into the kitchen, into the garden, even into the bathroom once. He chewed on Henry's old shoes, dragged socks under the table, and once fell asleep inside the laundry basket. Henry found himself laughing again, real laughter that echoed through the house. He began to talk to the dogs as if they were old friends. "Max, stop chewing that," he'd say with a grin. Or "Luna, you're the calm one. Teach your boy some manners." Neighbors began to notice the change. Henry, who used to keep to himself, was now seen outside, walking slowly with Luna, while Max ran in happy circles. The silence in his house had been replaced by the sound of tiny paws, playful barks, and Henry's soft laughter. One evening, as he watched the two dogs sleeping again, Henry whispered, "Thank you for coming to me." His heart, once heavy with loss, now beat with quiet joy. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a family again. It was a quiet afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. Henry was sitting on his front porch with Luna lying beside him, her head resting on his foot. Max, as always, was playing nearby with an old tennis ball. The peace was broken when Henry saw two men walking down the road toward his house. Their clothes were dirty, their faces rough and unfriendly. One had a scar across his cheek. The other kept glancing around nervously like someone up to no good. When they reached the gate, the man with the scar called out, "Hey, old man, we're looking for our dog. She ran off a few days ago. Looks like you found her." Henry's heart tightened. He looked at Luna, who had suddenly become still. Her body trembled slightly and her ears went flat. Her eyes didn't look scared. They looked haunted. Henry stood up slowly. "This dog," he asked, gesturing toward Luna. "She came to me starving, injured, scared. If she ran from someone, I'd say she had a good reason." "She's ours," the second man insisted. "You can't keep her. Give her back, and we won't cause trouble." Luna stepped forward, standing beside Henry. Her body was tense, and a low growl rumbled from her chest. She didn't bark, but her message was clear. She wasn't going with them. Henry narrowed his eyes. "She's mine now," he said firmly, "and she's not going anywhere." The men looked at each other. The one with the scar muttered, "We'll be back." Henry didn't flinch. "Then I'll be ready." As the men walked away, Luna didn't take her eyes off them until they were far down the road. Max had stopped playing, sensing the tension in the air. He ran over and sat by his mother's side. That evening, Henry double-checked every window and locked every door. He took his old shotgun from the closet, something he hadn't touched in years. It was dusty but loaded. He placed it near the front door just in case. He made a bed near the fireplace for Luna and Max, but neither of them seemed ready to sleep. Luna kept her ears up, alert. Max curled up beside her, still but wide-eyed. Around midnight, Henry was dozing in his chair when a loud bang startled him. Someone had kicked the front door hard. Luna jumped up and barked, fierce, loud, and angry. Max joined in with sharp, high-pitched yelps. The men outside hit the door again. "Open up, old man!" one shouted. Henry picked up the shotgun and stood behind the door. "Leave now, or you'll regret it," he shouted. The barking grew louder. Luna sounded like a wolf protecting her pack. There was real fear in her growls, fear, but also strength. The sound of police sirens in the distance made the attackers run. Henry had called the station earlier, just in case. The police arrived moments later, lights flashing across the front yard. Henry opened the door slowly and said to the officers, "They tried to break in. They wanted to take my dogs." One of the officers, Officer Mason, looked down at Luna, who was still growling softly. Looks like she was ready to protect you, he said. Henry nodded and put a hand on Luna's head. These dogs aren't just pets, he said. They're family. As the officers took notes and promised to patrol the area more often, Henry looked at Luna and Max, both finally calming down. His voice was firm, full of emotion. No one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm here. And in that moment, surrounded by barking, flashing lights, and his two loyal companions, Henry knew something deep in his heart. He had become their protector, just as they had become his. After the frightening night had passed, Henry felt peace settle back into his little home. The danger was gone. The bad men had been warned by the police, and Luna had proven that she would protect her new family no matter what. The next morning, Henry stood on his porch, the winter sunlight warming his face. Max ran around the yard chasing a leaf, barking happily. Luna sat quietly beside Henry, her eyes alert but calm. Henry took a deep breath and smiled. It was time to make things official. Later that day, he visited the local shelter and signed the papers to officially adopt Luna and Max. These two are mine now forever, he told the kind lady at the counter. She smiled and said, "They're lucky to have you." On the way home, Henry stopped at the pet store. He bought 2 soft collars, one deep blue for Luna and one bright red for Max. He asked the store clerk to add name tags. One said Luna, brave mom, and the other said Max, little fighter. When they got home, he knelt beside them and gently placed the collars around their necks. Luna licked his hand, and Max barked joyfully, wagging his tail like a tiny whirlwind. Henry also fixed the broken front door. He painted it a warm brown and added a small bell that jingled when someone entered. He even put up a wooden sign that read, "Home Sweet Home, Henry, Luna, and Max." Soon the neighbors started to notice the change in Henry. He wasn't the same quiet, distant man anymore. He now waved when people passed by. He stopped to chat during walks. His eyes, once tired and sad, now had a gentle sparkle. Some people said it was like he had come back to life. Every morning, Henry walked Luna and Max through the neighborhood. Children would run up to pet them. Max always rolled over for belly rubs, and Luna gently nuzzled their hands. One sunny afternoon, a little girl with curly hair pointed at Henry and shouted, "Look, that's their dad!" Henry paused, surprised. Then he chuckled, but his eyes became watery. He bent down and scratched behind Luna's ears. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "I'm your dad now." That night, Henry sat in his old wooden chair beside the fireplace. The room was warm, filled with the soft sounds of crackling fire and Max's tiny snores. He picked up a photo frame from the shelf, an old picture of his late wife, Margaret. Her kind eyes looked back at him. For a long time, Henry had felt like he'd lost all reason to smile. He missed her laughter, her presence, the way she filled their home with warmth. He gently ran his thumb across the photo and whispered, "I didn't know I could love again." Luna, sensing his emotion, came over and rested her head on his lap. Max, half asleep, crawled onto his foot and curled up like a little golden ball. Henry looked down at them, his eyes full of love. His heart, once heavy with grief, now felt light and full. He smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." And as the fire danced and the stars twinkled outside, Henry closed his eyes for a moment, not in sadness, but in peace. He wasn't alone anymore. He had found family, love, and hope again, all because 2 dogs had knocked on his door one cold morning.